Well, hello and welcome to a brand new episode in this Tweed series, following the river from its source right down to its estuary in Berwick-upon-Tweed. Welcome back to all my regular viewers, and a very warm welcome to any new viewers here for the first time. Today we are following the river from Walkerburn down to the mill town of Galashiels. After leaving the mill village of Walkerburn, the Tweed flows alongside the main A72 east in the direction of Galashiels. On the steep south bank of the river is the ruins of Elibank Castle, surrounded by forestry. Its history is quite interesting and begins in 1511, when King James IV of Scotland granted the lands of Elibank, as it was known then, later was called Elibank, to Catherine Douglas, the widow of John Liddale. The 1500s were the height of the River period in the borders, so it's likely that John Liddale was killed by hostile neighbours. Obviously, he was in favour with King James. The king granted the gift of this land to his widow. The condition of the grant was that her family built a stone house, a barn and a cattle shed to secure the land. In 1594, the lands at Elibank were taken by Gideon Murray. He was the third son of Sir Andrew Murray of Barony Castle at Eddleston. The reason Murray took the land was probably in relation to an attack on Falkland Palace in 1592. An attempt was made to capture King James VI by the Earl of Bothwell, Francis Stewart and 300 followers. The Earl was the nephew of Mary Queen of Scots, King James's mother, and had fallen out of favour with King James. He was tried at the North Berwick witch trials and thrown out of court. An infamous reiver, Walter Scott, known locally as Old Wat from Hoyk, was one of the 300, along with the others, and may have included the Liddales. Anyway, Murray was ordered to destroy their houses and take their lands. Murray built a castle at Elibank, and it formed part of the chain of towers along the Tweed Valley. This chain, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, would have signalled one another in turn if danger approached from either end of the Tweed Valley. Murray had a daughter who was not blessed by good looks, and he was desperate to marry her off to someone. One night, a band of reivers broke into the barn and tried to drive off Murray's cattle. One of the reivers was caught, and it turned out to be the son of Old Wat, also called Walter Scott, there to get revenge against his father's death. Murray put him in the dungeon below the castle, and his daughter Meg attended to him. And after a few days, she developed feelings for him and fell in love with him. So Murray, seeing this, saw his opportunity to marry his daughter off, and therefore he offered Walter a choice: marry Meg or hang. And initially he chose to hang, but having seen the way Meg reacted, which was to break down into uncontrollable tears, he was moved by how much she loved him, and so he changed his mind. He agreed to marry her and not only escape death, but succeeded in ending at least one reiver feud in the borders. The Tweed has a 10-mile journey before it brushes the southern tip of Galashiels, but before it reaches there, the river passes several small settlements. Still hugging the side of the A72, the first hamlet is Thorny Lee on the north bank of the river. At the next hamlet of Caddenlee on the south side of the river, the Tweed and the A72 part company. The main road heads north and the Tweed follows the steep-sided valley east, rounding a set of hills, of which Gala Hill is one. On both banks of the river are dotted some very grand houses, once manor houses overseeing farmland. The main road running alongside the river is now the A707. This is Low Peel Bridge. It links the A707 with the village of Ashesteel. The first attempt to get a bridge across this part of the river was in 1847, and the construction was undertaken by a chap called John Smith. However, during the building of the bridge, it collapsed into the river. They did finally manage to get a crossing here, but in 1952 it had to be reconstructed into what you see today. Its official name is Low Peel Bridge, but the locals call it Ashesteel Bridge. The main road running alongside the river is now the A707, and it provides an architecturally pleasing structure as it crosses the Tweed at Yare Bridge. Just before the river reaches Yare Bridge, it enters a very calm and tranquil spot called Yare Pool. It's obviously a bathing pool for Yare House, but a very, very beautiful part of the river. And in just a few hundred metres, the river begins to tumble over various rocky formations, a couple of small waterfalls and rapids, and it changes character again. The bridge was built in 1764 by William Milne and is a single carriage width of 13 feet or 4.19 metres, controlled by traffic lights at both ends. The Tweed then sweeps around a bend, swinging north, and meets another of its tributaries, Ettrick Water. But before it does so, it flows beneath a bridge called the Old Tweed Bridge. This bridge was built in 1830 by John and Thomas Smith of the Darnick Building Company based in Melrose. The Act of Union in 1707 played a crucial part in the massive improvements to the economy of Scotland and the living conditions of its people. Although Scotland and England had shared a monarch since 1603, the respective governments had remained separate and independent. At that point in time, it was Queen Anne, the youngest daughter of James II, who was monarch. She is often overlooked by historians, yet in her 12-year reign from 1702 to 1714, she changed Britain forever. On May the 1st, 1707, the kingdoms of England and Scotland became the Kingdom of Great Britain, ending the Stuart dynasty and laid the foundations for the rise of the Georgian era. The Act of Union brought the two parliaments together as one, which vastly improved trade on both sides of the border. Of course, in 1998, the Scotland Act was passed in Westminster, which reversed this union, giving Scotland the devolved government it still has today. By the late 1700s, the economy of Scotland boomed and led to major improvements in the lives of the local people. The Industrial Revolution, along with the enclosure system of farming and the exploitation of mineral wealth, led to the growth of the population and better living conditions. Improved roads were an essential part of this revolution, and many turnpike roads were created. The 1830s saw the height of the turnpike era. Tolls had to be paid on all roads at that time. One of these roads was the A7 linking Selkirk with Galashiels. The Old Tweed Bridge was built to carry that road over the Tweed. The foundation stone was laid by Sir Walter Scott from nearby Abbotsford House. It was one of the last public duties he carried out before his death in 1832. The Old Tweed Bridge was closed to traffic in 1975 when a new modern bridge was built. Between the Old Tweed Bridge and the new bridge is where Ettrick Water meets the Tweed. This tributary will be featured in a forthcoming tributary episode where we will look at Selkirk, another important border town. Half a mile from the two bridges on the south side of the Tweed is Faldonside House. It's another of the mansion houses that signed up to David Lintot's Meadows project, and it was featured in episode 2. Today, Faldonside House is an idyllic mansion with superb views of the river. The original building here was a castle in the form of a fortified tower, probably built sometime in the 12th or 13th centuries. In 1566, it belonged to Andrew Kerr, a well-known reaver. He was described as a savage-looking man and implicit in the murder of David Rizzio. Rizzio, who was a talented musician, had found his way into court life in France, and then, because of the connection with Mary Queen of Scots, had found his way into the Scottish court. Mary, Queen of Scots, being a young cosmopolitan queen, was taken with him. At this particular point in history, Mary, Queen of Scots, was married to a second husband, Lord Darnley, and it's said, although not confirmed, that a ménage à trois existed between them. It was also rumoured that Mary was pregnant to Rizzio with the yet-to-be-born James VI. Although Darnley had encouraged Rizzio, he grew jealous of Mary's fondness of him and arranged with Lord Ruthven to have Rizzio murdered. A posse of men, including Andrew Kerr, led by Patrick Ruthven, burst into Holyrood Palace as the Queen sat to eat with her courtiers. Andrew Kerr held a knife to the Queen's pregnant belly, while Ruthven and the others dragged Rizzio out of the room, stabbed him 54 times and threw him down the stairs. Andrew Kerr went on to marry Margaret Stuart, a relation of Queen Mary, and the young widow of the religious reformer John Knox. The castle at Faldonside was replaced with a modest house in the 1700s when wealth began to pour into the borders. But the house we see at Faldonside today was built 100 years later in the 1800s. Half a mile downriver from Faldonside is Abbotsford House, also on the south bank of the Tweed, and the home of Sir Walter Scott. Walter Scott was born in 1771 in the old part of Edinburgh, near to the university, and the 9th child in his family. 6 of his older siblings had died in infancy before him. At the age of 2, he contracted polio, which left him lame for the rest of his life. He was sent to the border region to recover and spent time at his grandparents' farm next to Smailholme Tower, near to Kelso. His aunt took him to Bath to try the spa treatments there, but nothing cured his disability. He was privately educated, learning first-hand from several of Scotland's renowned scholars and clerics. It was this interaction with the top minds of the day that set Walter on course to become the genius he was. His travels around Britain and abroad brought him into contact with many more learned people who all influenced his work as a novelist, poet and historian. The list of people he made contact with is endless. Walter Scott had risen so high in Scottish society that in 1817 he was instructed to find the crown jewels of Scotland by the Prince Regent, the future George IV. During Cromwell's invasion of Scotland between 1650 and 1652, the Scottish crown jewels had been removed. They were subsequently shown in England's Parliament to signify the absence of a monarch during the years Cromwell remained in power. After his death, they were hidden away. Scott, with a band of militia, started investigating the trail of what happened to the jewels. They eventually found a large wooden chest inside Edinburgh Castle, which had not been opened for over 100 years. Breaking open the box, there were the jewels. As a reward for Scott finding the jewels, he was made a baronet by the Prince, and Scott's close friend Adam Ferguson became the keeper of the Scottish regalia, as it is called today. The jewels can still be seen in Edinburgh Castle today. It was around this time that Walter Scott bought Abbotsford House. The original farmhouse that existed here had acquired the name of Cartley Hole, nicknamed Clarty Hole because the land here was so muddy. Clarty is a slang borders word, and indeed the same word in Geordieland for muddy. Clarty is muddy. Scott had the farmhouse enlarged before he moved in, and he renamed it Abbotsford after a nearby ford in the river used by the monks at Melrose Abbey. He had a huge collection of books and artefacts gathered from his travels, and so a year later in 1812 he ordered the massive expansion of the house into what you see today. Influenced by Gothic romance, Scott was a pioneer of the Scottish baronial style of architecture. The architectural style is obvious here at Abbotsford, with its conical roofs, tourelles and machicolations. The house and gardens here close for the winter when maintenance and cleaning takes place, but open usually from the 1st of March onwards. There is a link in the video description below if you wish to book a visit here, and I can tell you that the interior is just as spectacular as the exterior. Well folks, that's the end of this particular episode. I do really hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, then please give it a like. Subscribe if you haven't already done that. Maybe pass the link to this particular video on to a friend or a family member so that they can watch it. Maybe encourage someone that you know to subscribe to the channel, because that helps as well. If you go to my homepage, that blue PayPal link at the top is there in case you're able to make a financial donation to the channel. It doesn't have to be a lot, £1 or £2, all helps, because I have to pay for parking to get into these places. The entry, I don't get in free, even though I'm filming and giving them free advertising. I still have to pay to get in like anybody else. And so help towards that is gratefully received. The way you can help me most, if you're not able to do any of those things, is by simply watching the programme right through to the very end, till the last words disappeared off the screen and the end titles and the last bar of music has been played. Because only when that happens does your view get recorded by YouTube as a view. And obviously the amount of views I get helps the performance of the channel. Anyway, with all of that said, I keep saying that at the end of every video because I'm really, really needing your support on all of the work that I do. So, as I said, I say the same at the end of every single video. But anyway, having said that, I wish you all the very best of health. And of course, I'll see you again very soon in the next episode. But goodbye for now.